Yo, what's going on, everybody? Thank y'all again for tuning in to another episode of the Dope Sessions podcast. I'm your host, Kelvy. This episode is continuing the Dope Sessions podcast adventures at Anime Midwest. This episode is particularly special because this is another panel that the Dope Sessions podcast got to host. This panel is the Mr. PoPo effect. This panel was hosted by our producer, Andre Hewitt Mills. This panel consisted of Mel L and D Nick, Damon Hampton, Chelsea, and Nubian Bay. This particular panel is very special because where we're starting at is where Nubian Bay got to talk about cultural appropriation and talk about cosplaying. And you know what it means to either get it right or get it wrong. But let's go ahead and start that video. Here we go.
So like when you do cosplay, that's a figment of all of our imaginations. We can take it in any direction in which we want to take it. But when there's a historical and proven and noted basis to it, that's a little bit touchy. Like I can't sit up and say that I'm from a specific tribe in Africa if I don't know that. You know what I'm saying? Like, my family is from our American blacks. Whatever happened prior,
right?
That's left up to history to know. But if we're up here, like he said, misappropriating, you know what I'm saying, Native American culture, even down to the fact that even it's so specific with any kind of Asian culture that even the textiles and patterns in their kimonos and the way that they draw lines and stuff like that, if you're not depicting that correctly, that is a slap in the face. But essentially, when it comes to cosplay, it's kind of like a blurred line there, because you still have people walking around with kimonos that have a specific pattern that might be made for a specific caste system in their culture. Or we don't know that.
And you don't own that character. They still get the advertising, so they're getting the kickback of you promoting the characters.
Right.
Like, so there's a separate. I separate the emotion that we all feel from the like nuanced data of like when you gave the thing of Elvis, Elvis didn't give kickback nor credit to Big Mama Thornton. You know what I'm saying? So it goes back to that, Justin Timberlake, for example, gets a pass because Darian, he was on the TV show Soul Food, he did the choreography for Justin Timberlake. So he gets the credit and the kickback. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, a lot of the songwriters for Justin Timberlake, they get royalties for that. So that is different from an Elvis situation because they're getting the credit and the kickback.
He still don't get a pass from me though.
Yeah,
but that's a whole nother subject.
Sorry to interject, but if we could, I want to give you an opportunity to chime in, Damon. But if from here we can kind of move in another direction, because there's some great stuff that a lot of people touched on. I appreciate your contribution from the audience.
Thank you.
So Damon, give you time to respond.
I was just gonna say I have a slightly different perspective on it. One, I wonder about the Michael Jackson impersonator thing, just because I feel like you know full well who he's impersonating.
Yeah.
You're like, it's not like a secret. It's not, and the same thing about Justin Timberlake. Like, it's not like he's like, oh, I don't get it. I get inspiration from the sky. Like, we know where this comes from. But I have a slightly different perspective on the whole cultural appropriation concept. Like, I agree, the credit and kickback, I feel like it's cultural appropriation just kind of encompasses that. But I also feel like you cannot, we live in a capitalist society. We grew up in a capitalist society in this last 100 years. You cannot keep something sacred and make money off of it. Mm-hmm. You cannot have something and it be, this is my tradition and my love of it, and then sell it. And expect to make a large amount of money off of it. Typically the things that we view as culturally sensitive, it's culturally important to us, were built in a time when we had in trade economies, when we existed in small groups. You made enough for the people around you. They all existed in the same culture as you, in the same village, in the same town. And now we make everything on conveyor belts in another country, and then we send it back over here, and it's sold for $38. You cannot do that and expect people to be like, oh, I respect and love the culture. At the same time, we as individual consumers can, because if you look at anime and you look at us as anime fans, we do have a certain respect for the culture, even if we don't completely understand it. We have a certain reverence for it, even when it's foolish. Like it's I think every anime fan went through a high school phase where they thought Japan was this wonderland of awesomeness, and
I
while
still
that's
think that.
while it's a little foolish, and the reality of it is you know, they people like us, and they had their own weird histories that we could go into. Is that at least on some level acknowledges some reverence for that? And I think when you talk about a lot of other cultures, you talk about Native Americans, you talk about Black people. There's a little that also comes. You can't come to my hood, wear the clothes I wear, rap my music, and then go someplace else and then talk shit about me.
Yeah.
And then act like it's Gucci. It's not.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bust you in your head. You know what I mean?
I mean,
Like,
Because part of that though, it goes
metaphorically.
into
We do need
I got
to
you,
Metaphorically.
but real quick, that part of that goes into, you know, you got the credit, the kickback, but one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot of that is the respect. Because if you have a respect for what it is that you are doing, that's a whole nother thing. So I don't want to go too deep into that, but like, yeah, you got the credit, you got the kickback, but at the end of it, there has to be a level of respect.
So I want to tie in that concept of credit and kickback, because what we're essentially talking about is people being able to trade in a market.
All right.
And as people of color, as Black people specifically that are operating right now at a convention in a marketplace, I'd like to ask you, because everywhere else, like when we leave the convention, we go to like our regular square jobs, and some of you have square jobs as well. Like at your HR department, they're having conversations now about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And these are measures that society is kind of reflexively taking now in the public sphere to say, hey, let's correct some inequities in the way that, like, how people are hired or how people are moved through the workforce, and how they're able to get access to capital and commerce. But you all are independent creators. You don't have an HR department to go to. So my question to all of you, as independent creatives that are working on your own projects, and you're navigating this marketplace that's literally across the street right now, how do you have your interests as Black creatives protected, and as entrepreneurs protected in like this marketplace?
You gotta speak on this, Chelsea.
Yeah, you got it.
Chelsea's the OG.
So to backtrack, I've been doing conventions since 2008. My first convention, I had no idea what I was doing. I brought my product. I had maybe 10 items. I put it on the table, sold 2, felt like the day was going terrible, left my table for the entire weekend, and didn't think about it twice. And so from that, you know, it was just kind of like, you need to do better, you need to represent yourself better, because I feel like, I was one of 3 African American artists at ASIN that year.
Go ahead, you get a little more on my.
Yeah, sorry. I was one of 3 African American artists at ASIN that year, and B, you know, I very much felt that like I did not represent myself and my people appropriately by doing something like that. So I definitely decided going forward that I would push forward and represent appropriately. And I want to sidetrack and say that like I do work in corporate America, so I am a tier 3 IT infrastructure manager as my day job. And so diversity is a thing that I don't really see regularly, especially being an African American female in the IT field. That's not something that I've seen in the last 8-9 years, really. I see a lot more African American people in HR and accounting and things like that, but not in IT. So when I come to these conventions, I keep that in mind, that like I am still dealing with the same ratios scenarios when I'm vending to customers at these conventions. Yes, you know, I do have a specific like market that I cater to, but everybody is my customer, and I want to make my work feel inclusive to everyone. So I personally don't go the route of on my Etsy or on my Facebook, having my picture out there and posting left and right that I'm a Black-owned business. Eventually, they find out when, you know, they buy the product from me. But for me, I would rather the merit of my work speak for itself, and then I put it out there after the fact that, like, yes, it is a woman-owned business. Yes, it is a Black-owned business. So that's really where I go with it. And with dealing with people here, I just make myself present. Like, I try to keep from having somebody else run my table, because my husband is Polish. Like, he runs my table for me sometimes if I have to run to the bathroom or something. But for me to be out there with my customers, that's very important for them to see my face and to know who's making the products when they make their purchase decision.
Yeah. And so sometimes, man, it's you really get into that choice of do you sit back and do what she says, and like you say, just let the artwork speak for itself. But sometimes you have to be at a spot where you're willing to make noise. When we started doing cons with the Fits, it was back in Philadelphia, 2011. When we did what we did, we were the first artists to go in Artist Alley and actually do performance. Something that they really hadn't allowed at that point because nobody had ever tried it. So the artists that were around us, we were surrounded by, they loved having us over there because we drew people to us.
The
And
indie artists.
the indie artists that were close to us loved us because we were drawing attention to our area, which thus drew attention to their area. Some of the bigger named artists that literally work for Marvel in DC, who I refuse to name, tried to get us shut down the entire weekend because we were drawing so much attention to us that it was taking attention away from them. And so it became a huge issue. The thing that kept us from getting shut down in Philly was that DMC from Run DMC was actually there, and people kept telling him about what we were doing. And so while some of the indie artists were trying to get us shut down, he was going to the people at the con trying to get them to play our music over the loudspeaker. So we got there and we didn't know exactly what we were doing. We just knew this is an opportunity we have. Let's do what we need to do to make that noise and not be afraid of it. By that second year, or by that second con we did, it was kind of the same thing. By that time, the people at Wizard World started to hear about us and started making changes to what it was that their convention allowed in order to kind of shut us down. So we made some noise. They tried to shut us down a couple of times. It didn't work. And so they started putting rules in place to shut us down at that point. So now it's just a matter of, okay, we tried it this way. It worked out for a while, but then they put rules and hurdles in place to stop us. So now we got to find another way around it. But not being afraid to make the noise, not being afraid to say, okay, you shut it down this way. Now I figured out a way to do it this way, and continuing to make that push. Because like I said, like all of us, like myself included, like I work in education. I've had to deal with HR on the whole diversity thing because the areas that my schools are in are, predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods, with the exception of a few, like working in Wrigleyville. But the majority of my staff are of darker skin. And it's not because of me not wanting to hire people, it's because certain folks will see the schools and see the areas that we're in, and even though I've interviewed them, refuse to go into those places. So now I've got to deal with HR and explain to them why my staff looks like this when my hiring pool looks like this. You know what I'm saying? But again, being able to make the noise, being able to go out there and say, like, look, I'm reaching out to these people, but they're seeing what's going on around them and they're not wanting to go there. Like, it's a whole different thing. So make the noise. Like, if you're here, you're a Black artist in this space, be that, own that, and go with it the best way that you know how, whether that's being out front like Ray and D-Nick or being like myself. Like when I'm at these cons, if I'm behind the table, I'm sitting there with my pad and I'm drawing the whole time. I look up to talk to the people that are there, but I give people the time and the space to look and browse, and if they look like they're interested, I'll kick up that conversation. But not being too upfront, like these brothers are upfront and in your face, I'm more of a laid back dude in the background, and that works for us, you know what I'm saying? But again, we found our space, we made our noise, and now we let the artwork speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have the whole idea of people being pleasantly surprised. Like, I don't. My niece usually runs our table because we are an artist collective. Rod and Tail is an artist collective, a very diverse artist collective. We have some of everybody on our team, and at any given con, you might catch all of us or some of us in certain ways. We have different people. We have a beautiful, what is Jennifer?
Jennifer is
Chinese, and she's deaf in her ear. She's a super talented visual artist. We have so many different cultural people on our team that it's like to see when people are asking like who did this, or if I just so happen to be by the table, Chelsea will be like, my aunt did this, and I'm standing right there, and they'll look and they're like, you drew this? And I'm like, yeah, and it's like a pleasant surprise that's behind it. Like, this is so dope. And then the appreciation that comes from, like our allies is really a great energy that we get a lot of the time. It doesn't always come, as frequently as now it's starting to come a lot more frequently, but prior it wasn't as frequent. So it was very refreshing, when someone was just pleasantly surprised that an artist of color created something that they appreciate. You know what I'm saying? So it does kind of, it's a blurred fine line between all of it, whether we stand out front and, chant like and loud and proud, or if we're reserved in the back. So it's just a tactful decision either way. We have to be tactful.
I'll be quick then. For me, I focus on diversity in thought.
Why
like
you say that so hard?
I just do.
I focus on diversity in thought.
I do. I like. No, because and like Mel said earlier, respect. We'll start with respect. If there's respect, and there's diversity in thought with respect, then you're just gonna naturally get you're gonna get a rainbow of people. So that helps me at cons. Like, you find commonalities, like-minded, and you find respect and diversity in thought. So you avoid the whole tokenism thing of, that person is kind of a mocha complexion. That person is a milky texture. That one is a dark chocolate. He's pretty chalky over there. Like, no,
you know what I'm saying?
Like, so.
Oh, finally. I'm sorry. I just want to say, like, I kind of work as a solo artist for a lot of personal projects and stuff, except for I write with my friend Cordy Nelson. I kind of struggle a lot of times, actually, with how my work should reflect my blackness, simply because for a long time, there was this rejection as a young person. There was a rejection from other black people of my blackness, and it created this weird dissonance where it was just like I didn't feel connected to a lot of stuff in the culture. But then you get around white people, and you realize that you're not like them either. You still a part of the culture. You know what I mean? The culture it exists around you, and I think, but it also, what that's made for me is this kind of thing where I feel incredibly responsible, not only to myself to feel to be included, but to make other people feel included. Mm-hmm. And I think that requires a lot of research. I research a lot when it comes to creating characters. There's a book I was working on that I was really, really into, and I had a character that I wanted to be trans, and after researching and reading more, I had the realization that maybe that wasn't the best move, and I'm still thinking about it. And then, but also that required so what I'm getting at is not all of us know. I feel like everybody here has been pretty confident in their answers. I don't believe in confidence.
I didn't say I was confident.
What?
I
mean, I said
it with confidence.
Yeah, y'all said it. That's what I meant. It's a whole thing. I'm at the same booth as them. If y'all want to talk to me about my weird theories, I'll share them with you. I'll tell them all about how, you can't melt airplanes with steel beams. You know what I mean? I got all of it.
So on the note of giving access to audience, I know this has been a very deep discussion that we could continue on, but I would like to give an opportunity if anyone else wanted to field a question. I just wanted to make sure that if anybody had anything that they could chime in, because we are getting in the mode of wrapping up. No one? Anyone? Okay.
Do it. Go for it. I see it. It's on your mind. I'm not looking at anyone else. Go for it.
Sure.
Forget what Damon said. Be confident.
Do you feel feel like you shouldn't be putting out other cultures or like more white oriented content, like problems that your characters might encounter in your animations or whatnot? You
Oh.
want them to go a certain way to portray your history or issues you want to address versus
There's-
other ones that
There's a
are more
lot of
so-
that. There's a lot of that. There's a personal responsibility that comes from everybody who's an artist of color, whether, you know, no matter what culture or creed they're from, you know, it's a responsibility that weighs heavy on our shoulders for representation. Because even with the melanated tarot was originally created by a black woman in the 1920s, and she was unable to make her characters black. So, and she was commissioned by Rider Wild, which were two you know, white gentlemen to create this tarot deck, you know what I'm saying? And she was not in a position to draw any characters of color. So when we reimagined her deck, we purposefully made it melanated, you know, because we wanted to do her some justice. But at the same time, it's hard for anybody who draws in there or creates anything, you know, visually, and I'm sure you can, you know, attest to illustration wise, because we have a responsibility for representation to a certain extent, but when we have an appreciation for a culture like that, there's not a lot of characters that are in that, you know, in that realm, that are, you know, ethnically in that place where we can draw and represent. So since it's so very few, it's kind of like we're put in a box to kind of create others. So I got to the point then, rather than trying to rack my brain and create, you know, other characters to be melanated or whatever, I just started drawing cosplayers. You know, because I feel like if I see a cosplayer that has something on and they executed it dope, no matter what color they are, I'm like, I'm gonna put it out there. You know, I saw a really dope black man dressed as Deku yesterday. I was like, bro, that's dope. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna draw that. So it really does, and actually the fact that our community is so diverse in that way anyway, white, black, you know, Asian, Hispanic, people of every color in the cosplay community, anime community, it's not hard to explain that, you know. But at the same time, we do I try to lend a little bit more, like in my personal illustration for Black Pen, you will know the characters are melanated. Some of them have fuller lips, some of them, they have a very anime-esque style. Black Pen is a black mom, and she has a black daughter named Althea. But there are multiple characters that are from different cultures, and I try to infuse my background in graffiti and hip-hop and kind of entangle it with the anime culture and the anime style of drawing and manga style of drawing, because I appreciate that culture and I've done extensive research on it, but I do want to represent where I'm from too. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, it is a responsibility, you know, but at the same time, we want to give our audience, no matter who they are, a comfortability level to come and walk up to us and ask us about the characters or talk to us about what we're creating.
Yeah.
You know.
For us, in the Microphone Misfits, we have a saying: when we're creating, we utilize our sense of humor, views, passions, and pains. So for us as creators, we can't like shut off who we are and what we've been through in our experiences. So we find ways to push that into the art. And as fans of art, like when we don't see ourselves or we don't see what we look like in it, we find a way to connect to it outside of that. And so that kind of, because of those things, we're always going to find some way of getting us into what it is that we're doing. Me, like I'm also a veteran, and one of the things that they've been doing for veterans over the last few years is this thing called art therapy. Art therapy is where you're taking your experiences and you're pushing it through the art as a way of kind of a healing. And so, because of the things that we've been through, the way that we've gone through a lot of these things, like you will find that in the art in some way, shape, or form. And so that's kind of where that goes in terms of us putting ourselves into the art. So, is it a responsibility? I think yes, but it's a responsibility as well as a healing at times for that.
We did get the signal to wrap, but I would just like, because this was an audience question, everyone to get an opportunity to chime in that wanted to. So, Chelsea, if you would like to speak to that question about pushing forward the movement.
Yeah. So there's not much I could do to push forward the movement with my baking, except I do use recipes that I worked on with my grandmother before she passed away. So, very much Southern cake recipes that are unrivaled, unparalleled to most other.
They are pretty
yeah.
good. Yes.
This is delicious.
I'm not just saying it.
But then I also meld that with my traditional training in French pastries. So, it's a very unique flavor. If ever you guys order any pastries from me, 90% of it's going to be lavender. I put lavender in everything if I can. But with regard to the clothing, my goal has always been to, and I guess maybe it's because it's been so prevalent in our community, because I grew up on the South Side in Inglewood. My goal has always been to desexualize, women, and specifically African American women. Not say that that shouldn't be a component, but I want them to be appreciated and cute in their own right, without having this awkwardness of somebody always having eyes on you for the wrong reason. So when I create my outfits and things, I go off of the nature of being seen in, as Dina said, a balanced light. Like, I want things that people don't have to second guess their comfortability of leaving out the house. Like, it looks nice, and I feel like I'll be comfortable being out in public in it, and not have some inadvertent comments or gazes made at me.
Yeah. Quirky, cute, couture.
I was just gonna say that when
Function.
I create art, I feel like the best thing to do is to put yourself forward, because your story is so specific to who you are and where you come from, and then to examine that and take it into yourself, to examine what you experience as much as you can when you look at the story from the third person perspective for the first time, and then take the research that you've done and add light to that. And what I mean by that is it forwards the movement to me, because it creates, like Dina said earlier, diversity of thought, the diversity of experience. Because one thing I've always had a problem with is, like, I grew up in a certain place, in a certain area of Chicago, but I don't necessarily relate to the people I grew up with in the way that other people relate to the people I grew up with. I don't get everything that they like. I just don't. And I have to be honest about the fact that I like, I like, music that other people don't like, and why I like it, and then tell that story, because I feel I found other people who need that story to be told.
All right,
Good.
so
Mel covered us.
we are wrapping it up. That was the final question. I would like to thank everybody who took the time out to attend this panel. Thank you, Anime Midwest, for providing the platform. And once again, if you could give a round of applause to our panelists.
We will see y'all tonight at 7. Y'all gonna be at the show, right?
We're going to perform for y'all.
So,
And come
Also,
by.
7
come by
o'clock,
and see us
medium
at our
stage.
booth. Come check us out. We're at the Microphone Misfits booth and the Rotten Tail Industries booth in the Artist Alley. Come check us out.
7 o'clock, medium stage. It's gonna be a hell of a show.
Hell of a show.
And if you got any other questions, feel free to walk up and ask us. Like, we okay to talk to.
Yeah, we'll
Most
talk
of
to
us.
y'all. Did he say most of
So I want to say thank you to everybody who watched this panel. Thank you to everybody who came to the panel personally. Thank you to the panelists that was able to talk about this issue and other issues within, how Black people feel in those spaces. I want to thank my producer, Andre Hewitt Mills, for hosting that panel. Great, enjoyable, thought-provoking panel. You guys tell me what you thought about the panel. Was there anything that sparked your interest? Is there anything that you want to talk about? Because I think that this could be a very good open dialogue for us to explore more. So if you have any questions or anything that you liked about the panel, anything that you agree with or disagree with, just put your comments down on this video. Like and subscribe not only to this video, but to all the other Dope Sessions podcast videos, as well as like and subscribe to the channel. And again, I thank y'all again for tuning in to another episode of the Dope Sessions podcast. I'm your host, Kelvin, once again, and until next time, I'll see you. Peace.